Isaiah, Isaiah does talk about Isaiah does talk about it in a way that he really believed that there would be. And that belief in a Messiah eventually leads to Christians having a belief that that Messiah that Isaiah is talking about is Jesus. So, it's kind of interesting how the belief in a Jewish king ends up leading to a whole nother religion. And let me just put us up on the Facebook. And by the way, I did a trial to see if it was going to work. So it looks like it might work. I want to say that before I post this up and they kick us off. I don't want to say anything that upsets Facebook. I'll say it now. They better not kick us off, but we're going to try. And here we go. I did a little trial before to make sure that we could do that. And now we're live.
We've been kicked off.
Oh, stop. Don't say it. We're going on.
Don't talk about it.
After. Yeah. So here we are. So last week we also and kind of like this last part from chapter 56 to 66, some people call it a third Isaiah, but there is a different tone because the previous like 15 chapters of Isaiah are comforting Isaiah. They're Isaiah that's talking about Israel being restored, but King Cyrus restoring everybody and letting them come home and rebuild. And there seems to be in the last part of Isaiah an almost like recognition that it's not happening as soon as we wanted. It's not happening like completely, or there seems to be a holdup, and there's a little bit of a come down. So the first part of Isaiah is definitely kind of, more of the chastisement and the more of what we see in the prophets, which is more of a you better get right or otherwise, bad things are going to happen. The second part of Isaiah is it's going to be okay. And then the third part is kind of like in a little in between. And we saw that last week in the part that we read at Yom Kippur, which is, stop pretending that you're really religious when you're oppressing your people. So there's this, challenge to the religious hypocrisy. So there's kind of now a little bit of both. It's going to be good, but you better not forget it could not happen, which is why, again, some people say it's a third author, or some people say that it's written after, considerably after, maybe 20 years after the second Isaiah, where whoever that same author is kind of coming down a little bit in tone and kind of like a little bit more realistic and a little bit, well, maybe we don't quite, maybe we're not quite there yet. So it's definitely positive, but not quite as positive as the previous 40 to 55. So let's take a look at 59. We're going to read the next few chapters. What I think is going to happen is we're going to read some of a few chapters today, and then next week we probably will finish Isaiah. We'll read like 63 through 66, the last 4 chapters, and that will take us to the end, because some of the last chapters are short. Some of these are short too. So we'll read like 4 chapters today, 4 chapters next week, and that'll take us through Isaiah. So we will be in person next week. I'll remind people again about that at the end, but we'll be in person next week. And so we're gonna move into Jeremiah real soon, and we're gonna have a little break while some of us are in Israel. But Jeremiah, you'll see pretty soon, is a much different tone than Isaiah.
Good.
All right, so let us take a look at chapter 59. Rosemary, if you continue.
No, the Lord's arm is not too short to save, or his ear too dull to hear. But your iniquities have been a barrier between you and your God. Your sins have made him turn his face away and refuse to hear you. For your hands are defiled with crime, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips speak falsehood. Your tongue utters treachery.
So you see, this is not good. This is not good behavior. This is not Isaiah, telling you that, God's gonna, or God, it's not only him telling you that God is going to save you and take care of you and restore you and bring your tempest tossed back and those beautiful lines that we have just a few chapters ago. This is now calling people into account again, which is, some really powerful stuff, but it's not all roses and whatever. So here we go.
No one sues justly or pleads honestly. They rely on emptiness and speak falsehood, conceiving wrong and begetting evil. They hatch adders' eggs and weave spider webs. He who eats of those eggs will die, and if one is crushed, it hatches out a viper. Their webs will not serve as a garment. What they make cannot serve as clothing. Their deeds are deeds of mischief. Their hands commit lawless acts. Their feet run after evil. They hasten to shed the blood of the innocent. Their plans are plans of mischief. Destructiveness and injury are on their roads. They do not care for the way of integrity. There is no justice on their paths. They make their courses crooked. No one who walks in them cares for integrity. That is why redress is far from us and vindication does not reach us. We hope for light, and lo, there is darkness. For a gleam, and we must walk in gloom. We grope like blind men along a wall, like those without eyes we grope. We stumble at noon as if in darkness. Among the sturdy, we are like the dead. We all growl like bears and moan like doves. We hope for redress and there is none, for victory, and it is far from us.
Yeah, so you can see things are not going well. And Isaiah is saying it's because of our behavior. And it's not based on what other people are doing to us, it's what we're doing to each other, right? And so we're taking advantage of each other. We're planning against each other. We're not following the laws against each other. And the imagery that he uses is really powerful, right? He talks about snakes and spiders, right? And he compares us to we're like snakes and spiders. And the imagery is quite powerful, quite visual. It's really well laid out because, he says we're like snakes, and then, our snake babies are going to bite us, and, we're like spiders, and the webs are not, I love this line. The webs will not serve as a garment. When they make cannot serve as clothing. Their deeds are, so you can see that the spider's webs are being invoked too. So it's really powerful imagery, and it's just really beautiful the way, the way that imagery is used. When we talk about, and Isaiah is referred to about, clear the roads, raise the roads, make a highway. And here the roads are dangerous. They're crooked. They lead to bad places. And so it's a really bad situation. So we'll keep going.
For our many sins are before you. Our guilt testifies against us. We are aware of our sins, and we know well our iniquities. Rebellion, faithlessness to the Lord, and turning away from our God, planning fraud and treachery, conceiving lies, and uttering them with the throat. And so redress is turned back, and vindication stays afar, because honesty stumbles in the public square and uprightness cannot enter.
Yeah. Think about how powerful that line is, because that happens today, and when people can't be truthful and honest with each other, and when there isn't justice, we can't be successful. We can't be victorious. We can't be winners. That's the words that are used here. the connection between success and again, what you're, the way you're playing, the way you're playing, but the way you're living, the way you're, in the world.
Honesty has been lacking. He who turns away from evil is despoiled. The Lord saw and was displeased that there was no redress. He saw that there was no man. He gazed long, but no one intervened. Then his own arm won him triumph. His victorious right hand supported him. He donned victory like a coat of mail, with a helmet of triumph on his head. He clothed himself with garments of retribution, wrapped himself in zeal as in a robe.
Yeah. Now this is interesting because it says God, right? God doesn't find anyone doing the right thing. So there's no human being that's doing the right thing. And it says that God, I don't really like the word victory here for he dons victory. It's it's not really, it's a bad translation. And I guarantee you the King James has a better translation for this, where it says he dons victory like a coat of mail with a helmet of triumph on his head. Again, that's a typical biblical doublet, but it's not the words that are used. And it really takes away, it's not really about victory and triumph. It's about, what does King James say, Mary?
He put on righteousness as a breastplate
And
a helmet of salvation on his head.
yeah. So what I don't know how, victory instead of righteousness, or tzedakah, right? The word tzedakah, which means righteousness or justice. And then Yeshua is salvation. It's the word for saving, right? It's the root. It's the name Joshua. It's the root for the name for Jesus as well. But it is a sense of not so much of triumph, but of saving somebody. Triumph sounds like that's something you did in a war where you're going into battle and you crushed your enemies. Salvation really is a sense of, I threw someone a lifeline and I saved them, but it wasn't like it was in the neck of time, right? It wasn't a crush. This is going to battle for people, but it's more because no one else is doing anything, and I'm going to go out and do battle, for the sake of this is it, and I think there's more of a sense that God's fighting the good fight because no one else is doing it, but it is that God is doing it. This is all saying that God does this. And again, it goes back to the opening line, which is God's arm is not too short. And it's basically saying, this is why God had to intervene. This is why God's gonna save us.
According to their deserts, so shall he repay fury to his foes. He shall make requital to his enemies, requital to the distant lands. From the west, they shall revere the name of the Lord, and from the east, his presence. For he shall come like a hemmed-in stream, which the wind of the Lord drives on. He shall come as Redeemer to Zion, to those in Jacob who turn back from sin, declares the Lord.
Yeah, so it's saying that God is going to come down on and kind of like, do battle.
It's going to come on like a flash flood.
Yeah, exactly like a flash flood. It's going to burst through. And well, let's keep going.
And this shall be my covenant with them, said the Lord, my spirit which is upon you, and the words which I have placed in your mouth shall not be absent from your mouth, nor from the mouth of your children, nor from the mouth of your children's children, said the Lord, from now on for all time.
Yeah. And so the breed, the covenant, is one of intergenerational power for your children and for your grandchildren. And what are those words? I guess you could say these words that we're saying right now. The words of Torah, the words of the Bible. There's a power to them, right? And what it's saying is that power is going to not be, it's not going to be for a short time. It's going to be forever. It'll be intergenerational. And then it says, Me'ata ve'ad olam. So it's pretty powerful. And again, it's not with one person, right? It's not with one person. It's not with a king. It's not with a Messiah, right? My spirit will not be absent from your mouth, nor the mouth of your children, or your children's children, or for anybody, for generations and generations. So this is not a one-person deal. That's why, I have a hard time when people, paint Isaiah as if he's sitting there talking about Jesus all the time, or any person, or one king. So especially, the totality of it, now that you're in chapter 60 of Isaiah, you can see that Isaiah is not, the way that people have picked and choose a couple lines from Isaiah, whether it's, the discussion about a baby, or, they'll save us, or even a king, or again, some of the stuff we saw in first Isaiah, or the suffering servant in the second Isaiah, it never seems to really be about one person. And if there are references occasionally to one person, it's more of a one-off. It's more of an aberration than the consistent feeling that you get if you read, or if you see Isaiah from the lens of what's used in a church, or what you see on a building, you think that Isaiah is like obsessed with some person, and that's just not the case. And Isaiah is the go-to person to talk about Messiah. It's the go-to person to talk about salvation in terms of an individual. And even if it was, again, in some cases, specifically Cyrus, it's just not there that much. It's really not. I mean, you've seen it. I mean, you'll see a couple more chapters, see 6 more chapters, but it ain't there. So let's read chapter 60, and which kind of goes back to some of the other stuff that we've seen in the 50s, which is why to say that this is a different prophet, a different writer, seems a little bit of a stretch for most people, because the language really is so similar. That's why people say if there's a different tone, maybe it's more because of the time that passed rather than a whole different hand. So let's take a look at chapter 60, and we're going to see some of the words that from prayers.
Arise, shine, for your light has dawned. The presence of the Lord has shone upon you. Behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick clouds the peoples, but upon you the Lord will shine, and his presence be seen over you.
Yeah. So here's the line that we have in the traditional text, the full text of Lecha Dodi, is this line: Kumi uri kiva orech. Right? It's not the full line. Let me show you real quick what I'm talking about. How or not we, but how Jews throughout time have appropriated how we've appropriated lines of Torah. And let me just show you. I can find the whole text with where I can give you some of the this is You always can trust Wikipedia. Well, not always. I lie a little bit, but it's it's it is very good for lots of things. So here's the line from Lachadodi. So we, like many synagogues, do some of the verses. Some synagogues do all the verses, but we do Lachadodi, right? Likrat kala panei Shabbat nekabla. That's the chorus too, right? Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. That's also based on Torah parts. Likrat Shabbat lechuven elcha. All right, and then some synagogues do this line: Torah ri, right? Kiva orech kumi uri shir dabri kavod Adonai alayich nigla. So that's the fifth verse, and you can see what he did. Rouse yourself. He Torah ri, kiva orech kumi uri. So, he put, I'm going to say he, Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, put this kiva orech, your light is coming, kumi uri, come let the light shine, right? So then he uses the words uri, which is like ori, which is light, and uri means awaken. It's the same root as hitorari, but it's a beautiful play on the line from Isaiah. And this is an example of, again, how our music and how our prayers have incorporated lines of the Bible in very clever ways. So I mean, this is this is where it comes from. So it's a beautiful way of looking at light and looking at we've seen it other ways, other ways that Isaiah invokes, light, and we saw it last week. The light will shine on you and will be like will be brighter than the sun. But here, even if there is darkness, other places, even if it's all over the world, there'll be light shining on you. So yeah, it's a beautiful idea in using the light. So again, this is the way chapter 60 begins.
And nations shall walk by your light, kings by your shining radiance. Raise your eyes and look about you. They have all gathered and come to you. Your sons shall be brought from afar, your daughters like babes on shoulders. As you behold, you will glow. Your heart will throb and thrill, for the wealth of the sea shall pass on to you. The riches of nations shall flow to you.
Yeah. So we're about to get into a section here I want you to pay attention to as you read this, because these are visions of what will happen in the land of Israel. Isaiah is again most likely talking about what he thinks will happen with the restoration of the Jews to their land when they come back home, with the Persians allowing them to go back home and build up. And as we said, they were allowed to go back after about 70 years in exile, the Babylonian exile, about 586. About 70 years later, the Persians take over, and around 500, the Jews are allowed to come back. But it takes another 50 or 60 years for this restoration to really to happen. It's not an overnight success. It's not an overnight return. It takes a long time. And even then, much later in the reign of these Persian monarchs, there are still a lot of Jews living in Persia. How do we know? Because Mordecai and Esther are living in Persia after Ezra and a lot of the other Jews had gone back. Generations of Jews had gone back. What's interesting is, and you can't read this without thinking about it, as we celebrate 75 years of Israel literally right now, how this has happened. When it says that your sons and your daughters will be brought back to you, that's what happens right after the Holocaust. You have boatloads, we talked about it, the ships that came out of Europe that were literally filled with the children who survived the Holocaust, teenagers, young people. I think the average age of the people that were coming from Europe on those ships, like the Exodus, was like 18 to, it was like, I think 12 to like 36 was like the biggest cohort. Like the average age was like 18. And they were kids. I mean, they were teenagers. They were in some cases people who, as we mentioned, like Eddie Hirsch's mom, who spent her high school years essentially in Auschwitz in the concentration camps. And so she was in the camps from about 15 until 19 and was on one of those ships that got taken to Cyprus, that got taken and interdicted. 70% of the people who tried to sneak into Israel from 45, 46 to 48, 70% of them were captured. I mean, your chances of actually getting to Israel from Europe on one of those ships was virtually non-existent. It was not going to happen. Most likely it was not going to happen, especially during the times when the British really picked up their patrols. You weren't going to get in. But it was a constant embarrassment to the British, knowing that this was their policy and it was going to fail. So, yeah. Anyways, it's hard to read this without thinking about those people that came to the country, and then in the following years of Israel's existence, in the first 20 or so years of Israel's existence, as Jews were thrown out of every Arab nation around there, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, they were thrown out of everywhere. Those people came with their kids to the land of Israel. So in some cases, though, it was actually Gentiles, like the ships, like the Exodus and those ships that were captained primarily by American soldiers, American Navy people, who brought them there. So this happened, and this is still happening. As we continue, you'll see.
Dust clouds of camels shall cover you. Dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, they shall all come from Sheba. They shall bear gold and frankincense, and shall herald the glories of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be assembled for you. The rams of Nebaioth shall serve your needs. They shall be welcome offerings on my altar, and I will add glory to my glorious house.
And that's that all of this wealth from the Arab world is also, and at this time they weren't even really called Arabs. These areas like Sheva, Kedar, Nebaioth, this is Jordan and Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen. These places are going to bring their wealth to Israel, and they're going to be all offerings on the altar in Jerusalem. I mean, this is only starting to happen even now, which was the last accords that Israel signed with the Emirates, the relationship that Israel now has with Bahrain. Israel still doesn't have a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia and relations with Saudi Arabia, but many people find that that's going to be like that's the holy grail. That's the final piece of this. Yemen is embroiled in the civil war, so I don't know how far away that'll be, but Yemen is not close yet, but Saudi Arabia is pretty close, and then the rest of the peninsula. Qatar still doesn't have has relations with Israel. They do business, but it's not open. It's not the same way that it would be under a normalized treaty. But for us in these days, this was the wealth of the region passing through Israel, and in some cases, again, even being used as stuff for the temple. So you can see that this is what Isaiah sees as divine, proof for Israel's restoration. Again, there's a lot of modern equivalences, but it's interesting too that by the time of this part of Isaiah, there was wealth in these areas in the Arab world, which there really isn't as much wealth, in the earlier parts of the Bible, and we don't really see we see some references, but not like this. as much reference, and really using this as the example. We have the Queen of Sheba, obviously, in the story of Solomon, but here it really seems like this is maybe the Arabs during this period of after the destruction of the temple, that, with the Babylonians, that maybe they had an ascendancy and they became a little richer during that period. So this is one of the ways Isaiah sees our success.
Are these that float like a cloud, like doves to their coats? Behold, the coastlands await me with ships of Tarshish in the lead to bring your sons from afar and their silver and gold as well, for the name of the Lord your God, for the Holy One of Israel, who has glorified you.
And you can see the ships of Tarshish. You can see we've had reference to them many times in the Bible, including the book of Jonah, right? It's going to Tarshish. We're not exactly sure where Tarshish is, but it's not so much where Tarshish is, but that the ships that go to Tarshish are really good commercial. They're commercial ships. They're ships that can travel really far, and they can bring lots of stuff back. They're the best, commercial ships. They're maritime. They're the leaders in maritime commerce, and it's Phoenician ships. These are Phoenician ships. That's the key thing. So this is the example of the best and the most successful commerce is coming through, and it's going to be bringing great things to us, including stuff that's going on out in the islands, which are probably the Aegean. It's probably Greece. I think the translation here is, the vessels of the coastlines are gathering. This is again, even in another direction, aside from the Arabs, the Phoenicians and these other colonies in the Aegean are bringing their stuff too.
Aliens shall rebuild your walls, their kings shall wait upon you. For in anger I struck you down, but in favor I take you back. Your gates shall always stay open, day and night they shall never be shut, to let in the wealth of the nations with their kings in procession.
Yeah, that's definitely not aliens from another planet. I want to make that real clear.
That'd be fun, though.
That would be fun, but I don't want people to be thinking that aliens are going to rebuild Jerusalem, at least the way we use it. But B'nai,
Guest workers might be better.
yes, and actually, what is guest workers is the great translation, and the translation in the King James, Mary, for aliens is what?
Sons of strangers.
Yeah, so it's even more ironic, I guess, if you will, because it really should say the sons of aliens or the sons of those people, but it really is this idea of people from other countries are going to come and help rebuild. And obviously this is a testament to the success of the country, that people from other countries are going to help do your work for you. It's very hard to read this without thinking about modern Israel, because, as much as Israel has, a pride in Israeli construction and Israeli work, Israel has definitely in the last generation, in the last 30 years and on up till today, has really relied on guest workers and workers from other countries to do a lot of the hard labor. The first way that Israel did this was using Palestinian workers from the West Bank, the territories, whatever you want to call it, from Palestinian territories, would come in and do work in Israel, specifically construction and some of the more manual labor type work, which was, considered to be lower paying jobs. For people living in the territories, this was good wage. The standard of living was still good. After the Intifada started in the 90s, that became harder and harder to have happen, and today is virtually impossible to happen. There are very few Palestinians who have a status, guest worker status, where they can come in and go back and forth. So basically doesn't happen anymore. So what Israel had to do in order to have that work that they became dependent on non-Israelis to do. And again, I'm not talking about Arabs living in Israel. Arabs living in Israel have a lot of Arabs in Israel are doctors. A lot of them. It's a very high percentage job in Israel. It's definitely not considered to be it's not as high paying as here necessarily. Doctors don't make as much any other country than they do in America, by the way, just so you know. That's same in England and Europe, whatever. The doctors are not, there isn't that kind of, and maybe it's changing here too, but I don't want to, it's going back to kind of more of a, middle, higher, upper middle, whatever class job, but it's not like that. In Israel, doctors oftentimes are Arab, Israeli Arabs, and nobody says, it's not like a racial thing or anything else. It's just a job that a lot of Arabs have gone into. But Palestinian guest workers, once they couldn't come in, Israel started importing workers from other countries. So a lot of the agricultural jobs now are done by guest workers from Thailand and the Philippines. And a lot of the construction work is also done by people who are on permits from other parts of the world. Israel has definitely started relying on these aliens to help rebuild the country. But it's considered in Isaiah's time a sign of God's love and favor that this is happening, right? But it's also that the wealth of these other countries is passing through the country as well, right?
For the nation or the kingdom that does not serve you shall perish. Such nations shall be destroyed. The majesty of Lebanon shall come to you, cypress and pine and box, to adorn the site of my sanctuary, to glorify the place where my feet rest. Bowing before you shall come the children of those who tormented you. Prostrate at the soles of your feet shall be all those who reviled you, and you shall be called City of the Lord, Zion of the Holy One of Israel.
Yeah. So even the people that went to war against us, that hurt us before, the next generation of those people will be praying in your temple. Yeah. City of God, Sion Kodesh, right? Holy Zion, Holy One of Israel. However you're going to translate that. This is part of the prophecy that Isaiah lays out. Yeah. I read a story once about the child of an SS soldier who ended up moving to a kibbutz in the 60s, becoming an Israeli, converted to Judaism and became an Israeli. And this line in particular, the person, I read it. I didn't write it. I didn't put the words into that person's mouth. They said that this line from Isaiah, whenever they had read it or however they came upon it, it kind of hit home. And there are stories like that. It's not the only version of that story. That person's story was not the only one, but there are stories like that, for people who have, who came from that background. And it's interesting. But that's coming to Israel. And, that's people who have come to Israel. We had a story at Temple Beth Me about 20 years ago, 17 years ago, where we had two bat mitzvah girls whose great grandfather was a member of the Nazi Party. Was a German army officer. Was a Nazi. Was not an SS officer, but was part of the Wehrmacht. And his great granddaughters were bat mitzvah at our temple. So not exactly the same thing, but still pretty powerful, folks. I mean, when they didn't learn until they were in their teens that their great grandfather was a Nazi, but you don't forget that, the children of those who tormented you. Pretty wild. Yeah. It's pretty wild. So you don't have to just go to Israel to see that happen, is I guess my point. Yeah.
Whereas you have been forsaken, rejected, with none passing through, I will make you a pride everlasting, a joy for age after age. You shall suck the milk of the nations, suckle at royal breasts, and you shall know that I, the Lord, am your Savior. I, the mighty one of Jacob, am your Redeemer.
Yeah, that's one of the more graphic and visual imagery that'll happen, that again, this isn't one person. This is all of Israel. And again, this is the way we know that God is our Savior, is our Savior, not an individual, not a king. So again, the focus is going back to God, not to an individual.
Instead of copper, I will bring gold. Instead of iron, I will bring silver. Instead of wood, copper. And instead of stone, iron. I will appoint well-being as your government, prosperity as your officials.
Yeah, those are all, instead of having the cheap stuff, you're going to have the good stuff, right?
You're getting an
Copper,
upgrade.
no. Cool. Yeah, everybody's getting an upgrade. Everyone's getting the best stuff. Instead of going to Marshall's, we're going to Saks Fifth Avenue. We're going to get all good stuff. Now, this is an interesting phrase because we have a turn on this phrase also, but you got to see the first way that it's given.
The cry, violence shall no more be heard in your land, nor rack and ruin within your borders. And you shall name your walls victory and your gates renown.
Yeah. So here's the phrase. Lo yishama od Hamas. That's the 4 words in Hebrew. Lo yishama od Hamas. You shall not hear it. But instead you will cry Yeshua. You will cry victory. But again, King James will tell us
Salvation.
Salvation, right? So victory is
Do you know why they did that?
I don't, and I don't know. I don't like it, and I don't think it gives the right. I don't think it gives the right tone to this line, because Tehillah can also be, what does the King James have for Tehillah? I doubt it says renown, but what does it say, Mary, at the end of 18? And your gates?
Praise.
Yeah. So we use the word Tehillah, we use that word all the time, right? It's praise. It's the root for Hallel, for songs, for singing good things. That's praise. But renown is more like fame, right? It doesn't. Praise has a sense of holy praise. Like not for my sake, right? Not for the sake of being famous. So I don't like either translation. I think victory and renown is they went with a more aggressive translation to it. It's really to me, the feeling is a connotation of being saved and being thankful and praising praising that salvation, praising being saved rather than, hey, we won, and we kicked butt. And so that's now we're screaming defiantly. It's more, oh, thank God we won. It's great. And it was close. The translation in English doesn't seem to have that humility to it at all of how close it could have been. But really the first part is I find to be very interesting because it says Lo Yishama Od Hamas. So what's interesting about that, of course, is that the word Hamas in Hebrew means violence. That's what it means. That's what the word Hamas means. So what's interesting about that phrase, right, is that, of course, when we think about the word Hamas today, we don't think about, well, we think about violence, but we don't think about what we think about when we hear the word Hamas, because we think about the Palestinian organization that is conceived and devoted to destroying Israel, right? So Hamas is actually an acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement, right? That's what it stands for, Haraka al Mukawama al Islamiyah, right? So that's what it stands for. Those three words in Arabic come out to Hamas. Now, it's also known that the word Hamas means zeal, strength, or bravery, which at its root is the same root as, has at its root violence or fighting. So the word Hamas in Hebrew means violence, and it also is connected to the Arabic word meaning fighting. Okay, but for us, it's a bad word. It means, you don't want Hamas. It doesn't have a connotation of bravery in Judaism. It's violence. What's interesting is that when Isaiah says it, he's saying we don't want to hear that anymore. Because if it's bravery, right? If the word in Hebrew meant bravery, you wouldn't say, I don't want to hear bravery anymore. But in Hebrew, the word Hamas means violence. And it has for 3,000 years. What's interesting is that today, the word means something a little different, but it really isn't. So even though the words have come out to mean something different 3,000 years later, for us, we would say the same thing today, right? In Israel, they would say, we don't want to hear Hamas anymore in our land. Lo yishama od Hamas, right? We don't want to hear Hamas anymore. In those days, it meant violence. Today, it means literally that group. Okay. So it's just kind of an ironic language and how language developed and is reused and repurposed throughout time. So I've always found that to be well, not always, because Hamas didn't always exist, but for the last 35 years, that phrase, Lo yishama od Hamas ba'artzecha, you won't hear Hamas anymore in your land, is kind of a powerful new version of that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's hard to not think about today's politics and today's world and today's violence without thinking about these lines. Yeah. So, yeah. The good thing is you hear salvation, you hear praise, you hear songs of it's okay.
No longer shall you need the sun for light by day, nor the shining of the moon for radiance by night. For the Lord shall be your light everlasting, your God shall be your glory. Your sun shall set no more, your moon no more withdraw. For the Lord shall be a light to you forever, and your days of mourning shall be ended.
It's a beautiful thing to say, and it's a beautiful thing to say to somebody, who's suffered loss and you're it'll be okay. But again, in the context here, it's what's going to happen in Israel one day.
And your people, all of them righteous, shall possess the land for all time. They are the shoot that I planted, my handiwork in which I glory. The smallest shall become a clan, the least a mighty nation. I, the Lord, will speed it in due time.
Yeah. It's an interesting translation, which is, I will speed it up when I see fit. It's going to happen. The translation is that's an awkward translation, but you understand the idea, which is, if you ask when it's going to happen, it'll happen. And when it happens, it'll happen fast. But it's not going to happen until the right time. What is the King James translation on that? I, the Lord, will speed it in good time.
I, the Lord, will hasten it in his time.
Yeah. It's a little bit closer because it is in God's time, right? God will make it happen but it'll happen fast. I will make it happen when in the time that is, in my time, it'll happen fast. Again, it's hard to read this and not think about Israel, because it took a really long time. It took arguably 2,000 years. And then when it happened really fast. So it's really hard not to think about Israel when you read this. It's really hard not to have your mind go to, well, how did this happen so fast? I mean, it doesn't seem like it can. It doesn't seem like it's normal. And there is this sense that, like, that's what Isaiah says. That's what he says. So did it happen fast during the time that Isaiah was talking about, 2,500 years ago? I don't think so. I don't think it really happened that fast. I don't think it happened that fast. I think that's maybe one of Isaiah's frustrations, is it's not happening fast yet, because he doesn't even see that it's happening right now. He says, well, it's going to happen, but it's going to happen, like, when it happens, it'll happen fast. But we haven't quite gotten there yet. He sees it. He sees the light at the end of the tunnel, but he doesn't know when we're going to get there. And when it's there, then it's going to happen fast. It didn't really happen fast during that time either. But it happened really fast in our history. It happened, Israel's ascension into strength. Arguably it's still happening, but I think it's safe to say that Israel's achievement of strength and self-assurance happened in 20 years. That happened between 1948 and 1968. It happened in 20 years. Because Israel was established, fought for its existence, fought some battles with the Egyptians, and fought in the Suez, etc., and then fought for its life in the 67 war, in what we call the 6-Day War. And at the end of that, Israel had recaptured Jerusalem, the old city. And while Israel was attacked in 1973 and suffered a really bad few weeks really with the Yom Kippur War in 73, Israel was able to defeat the Egyptians and the Syrians one more time, and then really never fight with a tank again, ever, never needing to pull out a tank. Israel's fought wars in Lebanon, it's fought wars against terrorists, etc., but it has not fought a pitched battle like that since 1973. But in reality, after 68, Israel was fighting from a different standpoint, was in a different place. Israel had by far the highest caliber Air Force. It had an Air Force that could defeat any of its enemies. And by 1968, folks, Israel had probably the most important, and oftentimes, we don't talk about it, but Israel had the greatest guarantee of its security, which was nuclear weapons. By 1968, Israel had a nuclear arsenal, which in 1968, only 6 countries had. By 1968, Israel is one of only 6 countries that had nuclear bombs, nuclear missiles, nuclear capability, nuclear strike capability. That was quick. That was quick. And it was probably, closer to about 63, 64. It was, most people feel that by the time John Kennedy was president, Israel had at least a few nukes by then. So it doesn't mean that Israel was going to be safe and never lose another person but Israel having itself be able to be part of the few nations in the world that can defend itself at a level that was far out of its realm based on its size and income. The smallest shall become a clan, the least a mighty nation. I don't know. It's difficult to read that without thinking about it.
That's a serious, I got to jump in here. That's a serious, Matt is a serious subject. I cannot imagine that could be incorporated. I just had to jump in here. I think it's a sad statement of humanity when we have to participate in MAD just to survive.
Yeah, but what happened is that Israel sent a message to its neighbors that if you continue to wage war against us, if you continue to throw your larger armies against us, this is what's going to happen. The Egyptian army, is potentially larger than the entire nation of Israel, population-wise. And so if you're going to do that, you're going to suffer at a level that, again, we can't match you soldier for soldier, but we can match you with being able to do that. And that was part of the message that Israel sent to its neighbors. Without ever claiming to have nuclear weapons, they made it very clear that they had them. And so Israel did it in a way that, sent the message to their neighbors that you're going to have peace with us at some point. However, you're going to come to terms with it, you're going to do that. And it took another about 10 years for the Camp David Accords to be signed. And they were. So
yes, but that whole discussion is moot, Rabbi, because you're dealing with an enemy that attaches bombs to themselves. So once they get the big bomb, they'll just attach the whole country to themselves.
That's that's one of the things that Israel has to constantly deal with. But here's the thing: we live in a world today, John, that it's very difficult to guarantee anything, right? It's very difficult to guarantee any kind of security, even in our own country, as we learned in 9/11. But the reality is you do what you can do, right? And so for the last 20 years, we've kept our citizens pretty safe from that kind of terrorism. It's required a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of soldiers, a lot of security has been devoted to keeping us safe, right? Israel's done it for now 40 years, 50 years, really, since the late 60s. And Israel did it and did it effectively. Is it always going to be effective? I don't know. I mean, that's the problem, right?
There was an op-ed piece in the New York Times this morning that pointed out all the times that nuclear-armed nations have lost wars.
Yeah. But the thing is that all we can say, folks, is Israel has survived the last 50 years. And for the people who've lived there and how long it's going to last for and how long, I'm never one to say, hey, it's guaranteed, right? And that's why mutually, as you said, what we call MAD, right? it's not really, it only exists for as long as it exists. And I'm much more realistic about it. I'm saying that for the people who've been able to live and die a natural death, who've been able to survive in the land of Israel, who have worked to making sure that Israel will be a light into the nations and really not be aggressive. And that's the truth for the most part. The reality is that that's all you can do. You can only guarantee, we can only do what we can do. We can only guarantee.
Can you scroll back up for a second?
Yeah. Yeah.
All I'm saying, where is, I forget the line. All I'm saying is to discuss, I will stipulate everything everyone just said, right? You and Rosemary, no debate. My point is, did Isaiah prophesize, did God prophesize something 2,500 years later where, planet ending armaments were created? Come on.
Well, here's the problem, right? When we talk about
if God saw that, he's gone.
Well, when we talk about, well, there are lines in the Bible that I think people will point to where and even in Isaiah, where we talked about Isaiah has apocalyptic visions of the world destroyed. So I guarantee you that if the bad stuff happens, people would look at Isaiah and say, look, Isaiah talked about it. The reality is that when we see lines that come back and they come back to relevance, what's interesting about them is, well, did Isaiah talk about this thing in particular, right? Was Isaiah really envisioning that? The idea, I think, for us, especially for people who believe that is it a coincidence? One of the things that I look at is the human experience, and humanity doesn't really change, right? The way our minds work doesn't really change. And what Isaiah is saying here, to some extent, and his hope that Israel will be at peace and Israel will have, people from other countries rebuilding their country, et cetera, all those things, is this idea that Isaiah hits on here, which is that we don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to happen in God's time, which is, they translated it as due time, but as Mary pointed out, it's in his time, Be'ita, in God's time. When the time is right, when God chooses, when it's the right time. What I just find here amazing is it happens fast. And this word achishena it's going to happen soon. I mean, it'll happen quick. It'll happen in a fast way. Is an interesting idea, which is that, so what does that mean? Like, so what difference does it make? And the difference is this: for Israel, for us, whenever something happens to us and we finally feel like we're finally getting what we're due, we're finally getting, something right. Sometimes people say to themselves, well, wait a second here. Let's just take it in here. Let's figure out what we're doing. And you always should be thinking about it. You always should be diligent and thoughtful. But the reality is that sometimes when the right thing happens, it happens quick. And it happens fast, and we don't even recognize that we're in the midst of it because it's happening so fast. And so part of it is really to not only to be prepared and to be thoughtful, but to also understand the moment and also understand that it's quick, it happens quick, and if you don't enjoy it, then and you don't live in that moment, you're going to miss it. And again, who knows how long this moment will be for Israel. I mean, that's my fear, is that this won't last long enough, but we're in the moment now. It's kind of like this, I tell people always at their weddings, when I officiated a wedding, I tell people to enjoy the wedding, try to be in the moment, because it's going to go by, it's over in a few hours and then it's over. And here's a day where people have all come to celebrate a couple who've hopefully had a beautiful day and they've enjoyed it, and it's all about them, and people hope that they're going to have a great life together. Enjoy it, be in that moment and enjoy it, because oftentimes, it's been a rough way to get to that marriage. Sometimes people have had to deal with tough things. And when they finally get married, it's something to enjoy. And that's one silly example, but there's a lot of examples like that. There's a lot of examples where people work really hard for something, achieve something, and then they don't really have a chance to enjoy it because it happens fast. All of a sudden they're sitting at the pinnacle and they got to come down. They got to come down off the mountain, or they get knocked off the mountain. So what I find is just this weird phrase, which is not translated well here, but is one that I think is really timeless. And I feel it in Israel right now is it took a long time to get to this moment. I mean, 2,000 years, generations upon generations upon generations. And now we have this generation that we're a part of. We're living through this generation. Every one of us who are here right now are a part of this generation. And we're living through an amazing thing that's happened. And we have to understand how lucky we are to be here. We have to really be in this moment and celebrate it, because we don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, I hate to say that, but I look at it as a person, I hate to say it, but sometimes I think I'm like, what's his name? Harry, whatever, the guy from the Foundation trilogy from Isaac Asimov, who's not talking about one moment, but thinking about the span of thousands and thousands of years.
Selden, I think it is.
So Harry Selden, exactly. Thank you. I knew Rosemary would get it. Harry Selden. So his, when you think about where we are right now, I feel like I'm living through this time, and I'm so lucky that I got to be the generation that got to enjoy this. And I really want to make the most of it. I want to help, right? I want to help make sure it doesn't last a generation. But at the same time, I want to really, I really want to be in this moment. I want to be here in this moment to celebrate it and to thank God that I'm here. I sometimes feel like we don't recognize that. We don't realize how lucky we are. And maybe, again, I hate to say it, and I'm saying this also as an American, I don't know if we're, some people are much more doomsayers than I am about this, but, we, especially those of us who, lived from the 50s through, this period, this could have been the best time to be in America. There are people who are saying we're already on the descendancy. I don't know. I mean, I hope, but whatever we are, we're definitely at a high point. We've been at a high point. We were, those of you who grew up during the idyllic, period of the 50s and 60s, maybe even 70s, we got to live in really, really special times for the most part. So I don't know. I just find that we sometimes don't think about that, and what does it mean to be on this roller coaster of history? So it takes years, and then sometimes it happens real fast. So I find that line to be a ironic and powerful reminder to me. All right, now here's some reflections on what Isaiah's work is, and maybe what our work is.
The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me as a herald of joy to the humble, to bind up the wounded of heart, to proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned, to proclaim a year of the Lord's favor and a day of vindication by our God, to comfort all who mourn, to provide for the mourners in Zion, to give them a turban instead of ashes, the festive ointment instead of mourning, a garment of splendor instead of a drooping spirit. They shall be called terebinths of victory, planted by the Lord for his glory.
So you can see, Isaiah is saying, I'm here, to bring a good message to people of, things are we're gonna have good times ahead, that the bad things are gonna turn around.
And they shall rebuild the ancient ruins, raise up the desolations of old, and renew the ruined cities, the desolations of many ages. Strangers shall stand and pasture your flocks. Aliens shall be your plowmen and vine trimmers, while you shall be called priests of the Lord and termed servants of our God. You shall enjoy the wealth of nations and revel in their riches.
So another image of what Isaiah sees is going to happen for us is that again, a lot of the hard work will be done by other people. A lot of the manual labor, in those days, the work of building, the work of plowing, the work of agriculture, and all those kinds of jobs, those will be done by other people, and you get to be priests of God, right? Servants of Adonai. And you can see again the word here. It's not exactly the word Eved, it's Shartei Eloheinu. It's probably not the word that King James has for that, right, Mary?
Ministers.
Yeah. Shartei.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
now that it's mentioned a second time,
Yeah.
and Mary's version is guest workers,
Yeah.
is there any indication whether aliens means voluntary or involuntary?
That's a good question. So the word for Nechar is oftentimes translated as stranger. So sons of strangers. It definitely has in Hebrew a connotation of somebody who that's not their home, right? It's not where they're from. I don't think it is against their will, right? I don't think generally it's against their will. The times that we use, it's not the only word we use for stranger, actually. There's different words, right? We have the word ger, which is usually translated as a foreigner or as a non-native person. A ger is today the word for a convert, but in the Bible, it's a stranger. Here, that's why they used it, sometimes they use a different word for in the King James, a stranger or foreigner, again, alien. But it is this different word in Hebrew, nachar. I don't think it's a sense of like against their will. Moses uses the phrase ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya, which is I was a stranger in a strange land, which is, we love that phrase, a stranger in a strange land. It became a Robert Heinlein book, right? But the title, a stranger in a strange land almost implies that the word strange was used twice, by the way, in that translation. And that's the King James translation, stranger in a strange, I think, pretty sure it is. That's why he used it. That's why Heinlein used it. But I think stranger, it really would be, I was a foreigner in a strange land but Eretz Nochriya, when he uses that word Nochriya, it means I wasn't the land that I came from. So it doesn't really have a sense that, well, I don't know, Moses means it there that he didn't want to be in Egypt or in Midian when he was living in Midian. That's where his son Gershom was born. Gershom means I was a ger, I was a stranger there. So he says, I named my son Gershom because ger hayiti ben eretz nochriya. I was a Gershom. I was a stranger there. But it's the word nachar, nochriya, is like another land, in a strange land or in a foreign land. But it's more like, I was working, overseas, and I had a son, it would be the equivalent of saying I was working in China and I had a son there and I named him Gershom because I was a stranger in that place, So I don't think it was a sense of that. But the interesting thing here is that because these Gentile workers are there doing our manual labor, we get to be priests of God, which is like what is Isaiah's dream, right? What is Isaiah's best case scenario for us? It's that we get to be priests, all of us, that we get to work for God. We get to be holy workers or working for God while everyone else is working for us, which again was kind of like the vision of what, well, not the vision, but what the situation was supposed to be in the ancient land of Israel, which where the priests were supposed to work for God and we were all supposed to take care of the priests. So what Isaiah's envisioning is that the rest of the world takes care of us and we work for God. That's what he sees. That's his vision. Now, Now, I will say that while there are people who do look to Israel as a holy place, right? You could say, if Israel, let's just say Christians came to Israel and said, we're coming to Israel to serve God because we pray to God this way. And everyone in Israel essentially worked as a travel agent or as a hotel worker while they were helping Christians come to Israel to worship there. It's not exactly Isaiah's vision, but it's not quite different, unless they were, of course, coming to our temple that was ministered by Jewish high priests, which, by the way, is also a fantasy that some fundamentalist Christians have, that one day there will be a temple rebuilt, and Jesus will be there, and Jews will be priests in this temple. So that's not quite out of the realm of what people read this today, at this very moment, and envision us doing this. That you and I will all move to Israel and we'll all be priests to God to fulfill this line. That is a fantasy. That is a real fantasy for people. By the way, I use that word. I know what I'm saying by saying a real fantasy. This is what people fantasize about. That's their hope. And I know it sounds strange, but you know what's interesting is that what is happening in Israel and what really is happening in Israel, I can make the argument. I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to put it out there for you, and you think about it. Most people today, the growing sentiment, I'm just going to throw it out there. Don't say I'm crazy. I'm just telling you, you could read it this way. One could read it this way. We don't worship today. Most people don't worship God anymore. What do we worship? What do we worship?
Success.
Well, that's a good one. I was actually going more towards what specifically is our God today?
Celebrity.
Well, that's another one too.
Money and time.
Well, you're all getting, those are all parts of it, but that's not what I'm getting at. What is our real God? What do we put our trust and faith in? Come on. This is not a trick question. What do we around the world, not just Americans, what do we put our trust and faith in? If you're sick, what do you do?
Call a doctor.
Which is
Medicine.
so it's all part of science.
Science.
It's science. We put our faith in science. Our trust and hope is in science. If we're sick, we don't go to a witch doctor or to a rabbi or priest to be prayed over. Some of us do, but most of us don't. Most of us go to a doctor and hope the doctor can fix us. Most of us, when we think about how we're going to be protected and how we're going to, when we really think about it, John, who's going to protect us? John is. Technology is going to. Our technology is going to save us. Right now, we are constantly upgrading and on a minute by second basis, upgrading our cyber technology.
I think we're at a point where hell is going to destroy us.
Okay. Well, that's part of the technology. That's the
You
downside.
start praying when the science can't help you anymore.
Correct. So science and technology, my only point is the science and technology is our God today. Those are our gods. Those are what we put our faith in, science, technology. What's so interesting today? I'm just putting it out there. You can think about it. And I'm not saying it's what Isaiah is saying. What does Israel do today, folks? Why do these countries sign peace treaties with Israel?
No, because they're leaders in it, in the disciplines.
Yeah, so we're leaders in Israel in science and technology. Israel is benefiting now, not from its agricultural goods and services of what they did. They essentially, today Israel's economy is grounded in science, technology, and tourism. I'm not so sure that Isaiah didn't nail it right here. We'll enjoy the wealth of nations and revel in their riches because they will buy your technology. You'll be their priests. You will be their tech leaders. And to some extent, you'll also create a way for these people to come and worship and pray and be close and walk in the footsteps of Jesus and everything else that people do when they come to Israel. So I'm not so sure that what Israel has done by creating a situation where its guest workers take care of their flocks, not really their flocks anymore, but their plants and their trees and their greenhouses, and they're doing this other stuff. So I'm not 100% sure that we're not actually put it in the other way. And he might have nailed it. He might have actually said what Israel's doing right now. And again, we're not priests, we're not Kohanim, which is the word he used, Kohanei Adonai, but we are definitely serving and leaders of the belief that most people have, which is technology. So it's an interesting little interpretation, but I don't know if it's that much of an interpretation of how we get from point A to point B. All right, now what does Isaiah see here?
Because your shame was double, men cried, disgrace is their portion. Assuredly, they shall have a double share in their land. Joy shall be theirs for all time. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery with a burnt offering. I will pay them their wages faithfully and make a covenant with them for all time. Their offspring shall be known among the nations, their descendants in the midst of the peoples. All who see them shall recognize that they are a stock the Lord has blessed.
Yeah, so all the bad things that we had to live through, now there's going to be a payout for this. There's going to actually be a recompense and an actual, it's going to be big. It's going to, the turnaround is going to be big.
I greatly rejoice in the Lord. My whole being exults in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of triumph, wrapped me in a robe of victory, like a bridegroom adorned with a turban, like a bride bedecked with her finery.
Yeah. Now that reminds us of the fact that God is going to be in garments of victory or justice. Here, though, the words are kind of reversed and they're placed on us. And what's interesting is that it's not just images or clothing that's assigned to war, which before it was chainmail, by the way, which is shareen, which is a very unusual word in Hebrew, but it is, it is mail. It's armor, right? Here it is garments that are more celebratory, right? Garments and robes. And here they are, turbans and bedecked with finery is not a bad translation, but the I don't know what people think about with finery, but it's really articles of what like a bride would wear, including like veil and all the kinds of things that what's the King James have for finery?
Jewels.
Yeah. That would definitely be part of clay. The clay are kind of like the things that you're supposed to wear in that situation, right? Which would be jewels and a veil or whatever kinds of things that a bride would wear. And it tells us that at least in those days, that the groom would wear a turban, which is pretty cool too. That's part of what in those days a bride had some kind of crown or some kind of something on her head, and so did the chatan, so did the bridegroom. So that's interesting to think about, a bridegroom having it's kind of what you see like in Indian weddings, right? You'll see a bridegroom wearing a turban in an Indian wedding, some of those other weddings and Eastern traditions. So last line.
For the earth brings forth her growth, and a garden makes the seed shoot up. So the Lord God will make victory and renown shoot up in the presence of all the nations.
Yeah. And again, not wild about victory and renown. It's the same usage of those words, tzedakah tehillah, which is justice or righteousness and praise. Much better translations of, again, I just think that those words are a little bit closer to the original, and also original meaning, a little bit closer to the kind of humility and like the good parts of this, which is that it's not just about winning, right? Because victory seems definitely much more about winning. Tzedakah really has a sense of justice and equity and righteousness, that the good things happen and that praise happens. So I like a translation that conveys a little bit more of not that I crush my enemies. Because it's not, those are not the translations. But again, the last verse in particular, these words, smicha, zruah, tatzmiach, yatzmiach, these words, smicha, tatzmiach, yatzmiach, those are all roots. That's the root for to spring forth, to like a root, like something that comes out of the ground. And zruah is a seed, right? So the imagery here is really like a garden springing up. And so, the justice is springing up. It's more flowery. I mean, that's really what it is. It's really a beautiful kind of imagery, I think, to some extent. But no, I guess could be a heartier and more violent imagery of things growing up out of the ground. But I don't know. It seems to me like nice imagery rather than violent things coming out of the ground, or just victory and praise. I mean, victory and renown, or it's more of good things and healthy things coming up out of the ground. So that's a really nice, some nice imagery in chapter 61. We're probably going to finish with chapter 62 today. And as I said, next week we'll read 63, 64, 65, 66, the last 4 verses. But we'll see. Let's read chapter 62 though. Part of, again, Isaiah's final prophecies. And again, you'll see a lot of the same imagery, some of the same words that we've seen.
For the sake of Zion, I will not be silent. For the sake of Jerusalem, I will not be still, till her victory emerge resplendent and her triumph like a flaming torch. Nations shall see your victory, and every king your majesty, and you shall be called by a new name which the Lord himself shall bestow. You shall be a glorious crown in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the palm of your God. Never more shall you be called forsaken, nor shall your land be called desolate, but you shall be called, I delight in her, and your land espoused. For the Lord takes delight in you, and your land shall be espoused.
Yeah. So again, the bad situation being turned into something beautiful, something good. I delight in her. That's a great way of calling Israel. I will delight in her. It's a nice name, though usually it's not a name that we use a lot. And again, chafetz is used here twice, ki chafetz, which is again translated as delight, but this is the name though, chefsi ba. I take delight in her, chefsaba. So that's where the name comes from. It's not used a lot, but if you ever heard the name Hephzibah, that's what it means. I will delight in her, which is what God says is going to happen to the land of Israel. Hephzibah. Not a common name, but that's what it means. You've heard it.
As a youth espouses a maiden, your sons shall espouse you, and as a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you.
So you see some of the imagery that we're now seeing here in this last section? wedding imagery, right? Bridegrooms and brides, the wedding, the crown and the turban, the things that people wear at their weddings, right? These are imagery. This is imagery of good things. And what's one of the best things? Weddings. That's one of the best things. And now listen to this next line.
Upon your walls, O Jerusalem, I have set watchmen who shall never be silent by day or by night. O you, the Lord's remembrancers, take no rest.
Yeah. So we use this phrase as part of a song. Al Homotayik. We don't say Yerushalayim, we say Ir David, which is the other name for Jerusalem. Yivkadati Shomrim, Kol Hayom v'Kol Halayla. That's part of Sisu et Yerushalayim, right? Sisu et Yerushalayim, Giluva Kol. Yeah, Al Homotayich Ir David, Yivkadati Shomrim, Kol Hayom v'Kol Halayla. Al Homotayich Ir David, Yivkadati Shomrim, Kol Hayom v'Kol Halayla. It's a beautiful line, and it's one that we oftentimes sing at weddings. Sisu et Yerushalayim. This is a beautiful phrase. On your walls of Jerusalem, I've set watchmen who will never be silent. So, look, the reason you have to have these watchmen is because you got to watch for someone coming in, right? It's not a good reason that you have to have it, right? But the point is that these watchmen are going to do their job, right? And they're always going to be able to do their job. And we're never going to stop. And this is what, this is why Israel's defense forces are so well prepared and take their job so seriously, because they really do see themselves as fulfilling this vision of what Isaiah and what the Bible talks about. That's the vision of what happens in Israel, is that these people never stop and they never rest. And to some extent, they feel like they're doing God's work. We feel like we're doing God's work. Even people who aren't religious feel that way. Even people in Israel who are 100% atheist or agnostic feel to some extent that they're the Shomrim. They're the guards that will never be silent. That will never sleep or never slumber. It also says later on, in the Bible. So, this is why it's such a serious issue, and it's why it's such a, to some extent, why people see it as an important and holy task to be the watchman. Yeah. And it's, by the way, one of the reasons why Israel's army is called Israel Defense Forces. They're not called the Israeli army. It's not the Israeli armed forces. It's Israel Defense Forces. It's the Tzahal Haganah Yisrael. Haganah means defense. So yeah, it's not about being aggressive. It's not conquering other people. It's defending your people. That's the role, and that's what they see as important. Okay. So yeah, we've turned that line into a song. Not Yerushalayim, but all right.
And give no rest to him until he establish Jerusalem and make her renowned on earth. The Lord has sworn by his right hand, by his mighty arm, nevermore will I give your new grain to your enemies for food, nor shall foreigners drink the new wine for which you have labored. But those who harvest it shall eat it and give praise to the Lord, and those who gather it shall drink it in my sacred courts.
And that's a really powerful imagery, powerful, phrase, because what could be the worst is, the worst, punishment is to have, planted and created something of value, and then for other people to come in and take it, which still bothers us. It bothers us. It bothers us. It hurts people when that happens, right? So it bothers us when someone from another country does it. It bothers us when people from our own country do it, if we feel like they're doing it without merit, it's not a good way to create internal strength by taking stuff away from people who feel like it's theirs.
Well, now you've got a kind of a contradiction, because before he was saying, oh, aliens are going to do all this work for you.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
they're not going to get to drink the wine for which they labored. And
well, you're right. So there is this sense that they're, but it, but it is yours, Rosemary. The reality is that if we have a farm and we have people working on our farm that are not us, or not just our family, it's still our farm. You're 100% right. But we feel that way about our wealth, whether we actually physically create.
I know we feel that way, and I'm just pointing this out.
I was watching a Civil War movie yesterday, and watching, that when the Confederate tax collectors would come around and take away the goods of the plantation owners who, had to feed the soldiers, and they were going around taking their crops, and they're protesting, they're taking their crops, and it's like, your slaves are the ones who got your crops for you. They were slaves, and but yet it was their stuff and they didn't like it. So it's part of the ironic nature of what happened in our country during the Civil War, at least for some people. Yeah. So yeah, that's the way we feel. But we'd feel the same way if we had people working for us, and then we made a lot of money, and then the government came around and took all our money. We'd be still not happy with it if it wasn't done in a right, it's we still feel that way. That's all I'm saying. That feeling can still be with us. So yeah, on the contrary, it's gonna all be good. All right.
Pass through the gates, clear the road for my people, build up the highway, remove the rocks, raise an ensign over the peoples. See, the Lord has proclaimed to the end of the earth, announced to fair Zion, your deliverer is coming. See, his reward is with him, his recompense before him.
Wow. So now Bat Zion, again, fair Zion. You can see this is like a scene from Game of Thrones, where people are coming in and the flags are waving and people are happy because it's good. Things are good and safe.
And they shall be called the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord, and you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken.
Yeah. And so drusha means sought out, to seek something out. It's the root for the word midrash, to seek out, to search, to try to find. And so Jerusalem is going to be a city that people will want to come to. It'll be a place where people will celebrate in. So yeah, I mean, we got to see a lot of beautiful imagery in Isaiah today. A lot of really powerful images and metaphors that that kind of calls out this language of hope in a positive way. Obviously, in this case, it's wonderful because most of the stuff is really good. And again, some of these lines are still in our liturgy because they're so powerful and they're so beautiful. And they're, we take out some of these really beautiful lines, kind of again out of context, but they're the sense that, these are good things and we celebrate them. So next week, we're going to finish up with the last few chapters. You can see 63 here, which is about 20 verses, 19 verses, 64, which is a very short chapter. It's only 11. And then this chapter is about 25. And then the last chapter of Isaiah, chapter 66, is 24. So we're going to finish up with those last few chapters of Isaiah and kind of like summarize and come back to what we saw in Isaiah. And there will be some words, I promise, in the last chapter that also are in our prayers and that have kind of come into our have always been part of our prayers and to some extent our vision of what would happen in Jerusalem. And then in some cases, songs that we sing about Jerusalem today, in the last 75 years, and specifically in some cases with Jerusalem, with the reunification of Jerusalem in 67, when a lot of songs about Jerusalem were composed and Jerusalem was reunified, which we also celebrate, right? We celebrate Yom Yerushalayim, which is Jerusalem Day, which is coming up. Yom Yerushalayim this year is, I should tell you the date of on the secular calendar, because if I tell you it's the 28th of Iyar, you're going to go, okay. But it's May 19th. So it's just after, next Friday. And we'll have services next Friday in person. We're going to have Rick and Addie will be there and we'll sing some songs about Jerusalem. And on the 16th, a week from today, we'll be in person at the temple for this, or join us online. We're going to finish up Isaiah and kind of summarize Isaiah and look back on Isaiah as we've been reading the last few months. And it's a kind of perfect timing because, again, as we're thinking about Israel and Jerusalem in particular right now, it's a time to think about how lucky we are to be able to go to Jerusalem and because hopefully again to be in this moment and to and to celebrate this maybe again this unique time unfolding in history that we're lucky enough to be a part of. So, and again, next week we'll be in person. Next Monday is the secular 75th anniversary of Israel. I don't know what news channels are gonna be talking about that day. I don't know if they're gonna be referencing it on May 15th. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. We hope it'll be a peaceful week in Israel as well. I mean, there's fear that that some of the protests or some of the things that are going to go on around that time are going to be violent. As I mentioned before, Israel celebrates Yom Ha'atzmaut on the Hebrew calendar, which was a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago almost. But it was for us. It was April 26th, almost two weeks ago tomorrow. So we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut on that day, Israel's Independence Day, and all their celebrations were that day. For Palestinians who call May 15th Nakba, it's always May 15th. So for us, Yom Ha'atzmaut is only on May 15th every 19 years. So on Israel's, actually next year, Israel will have its birthday on, is that right? 38, yeah. On the 76th anniversary, Israel will have its birthday on the same day. But wait a second, it might be one day off. Yeah, it'll be one day off because it'll be it's a leap year next year. So it's 1 year off. It's not going to be, oh, wait. It will be, because 1948 was a leap year too. So yeah, it will be the same day. Next year, Yom Ha'atzmaut and the Nakba will be the same. It'll be the same day. I'm just saying it's interesting because if you look at two narratives, one of the narratives can have its day on one and one can have it on the other. But next year, Yom Ha'atzmaut is, can someone confirm that for me? No, I'm right. It's May 14th. And yeah, the Nakba will be commemorated on May 15th. So it'll be 1 day off. So there we have it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for being with us and for reading Isaiah today with us. Thank you, Rosemary, for leading us in the reading and taking us through Isaiah. So we'll see everybody again, hopefully tomorrow night. We'll be in person for numbers, or coming up in the next few weeks, we'll have some stuff in person too. So take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.